My people do not weep. This is not a matter of pride. It is simply biology. The Sorvathi process grief, the way other species process mathematics. Quietly, internally, with great precision, and no visible output. When my father died, I sat still for 4 minutes, recalculated my responsibilities, and returned to work. My colleagues respected this. They called it strength. I know now that it was not strength. It was just the only thing I knew how to do. The night I lost Lyra, I sat on a cold metal bench in the transit corridor of Nexus Orin and did something I had never done before in 41 years of living. I sat still and I did nothing. No calculation, no recalibration, no plan forming behind my eyes. I simply sat, and the universe continued around me. Ships docking, species moving, voices in 40 languages filling the air, and I was not part of any of it. I was just a mother on a bench, and my daughter was somewhere in the dark. She was 9 years old. She had my eyes and her father's curiosity, which is a dangerous combination. She had followed a group of travelers through the wrong gate because she wanted to see what kind of ship they were boarding. I had turned around for 40 seconds. The shuttle sealed. It departed for the outer drift, a region so lawless and unmapped that even the station's automated systems simply labeled it with a symbol that translated roughly to, "Do not." The station authorities were kind. They offered me water, which I did not drink, and probability assessments, which I did not want to hear but heard anyway. Recovery likelihood under 4%. Shuttle beacon lost 18 minutes after departure. No patrol routes serviced the outer drift. No allied species maintained presence there. They were sorry. They were genuinely sorry. But sorry was a feeling, and feelings, as I had always believed, did not change outcomes. I was still sitting on that bench 2 hours later when Marcus Webb sat down next to me. I knew who he was. We had met once, at a diplomatic function 3 months prior. He was the Earth military liaison attached to Nexus Orin's Trade Council, though he spent very little time doing anything that resembled diplomacy. He was broad and somewhat loud, and he moved through spaces as though he had never in his life considered that he might be in someone's way. At that function, he had laughed too loudly at something his own colleague said, spilled a drink, apologized to the drink, and then somehow ended the evening having made friends with 6 species who had previously refused to speak to each other. I had found him bewildering. I still did. He sat down next to me without asking. He was eating something from a small wrapper, some kind of compressed earth food that smelled like salt and synthetic protein. He did not say anything for almost a full minute. He just sat there, eating, looking at the transit corridor like he was watching weather pass. Then he said, "I heard what happened." I said nothing. "I'm going to go get her," he said. I looked at him. I explained precisely and without emotion everything the authorities had already told me. The odds, the beacon loss, the jurisdiction gap, the fact that 3 separate search-capable species had already assessed the situation and declined. I laid it out clearly, because I believed he had not understood the situation, and I believed that once he understood it, he would nod sympathetically and leave. He listened to all of it. He finished his food. He folded the wrapper into a small square and put it in his pocket. "Okay," he said. "What does she like?" I stared at him. "Your daughter," he said. "What does she like?" "Favorite things. Foods. Colors. Topics she talks about. When she's scared, what does she do? Does she hide? Does she talk? Does she go quiet?" I opened my mouth to tell him again that the probability of locating a single child in the outer drift without a beacon was essentially 0. Instead, what came out was, "She talks. She talks constantly when she is frightened. She asks questions about everything because it makes her feel like she understands what is happening." Marcus nodded, as though this was the most useful information he had ever received. "What else?" I told him. "I do not know why." I told him she loved structural engineering, that she could identify ship models by engine sound, that she was allergic to one specific compound found in 3 common food types, and always carried her medical badge, that her favorite color was the particular deep orange of a gas giant's upper atmosphere. I told him she would not cry in front of strangers, but she would argue with them, because arguing felt more like control than crying did. He listened to everything with complete attention. No species I had ever encountered gave attention the way humans did when they chose to. It was almost uncomfortable, like being examined by something that genuinely cared what it found. When I finished, he stood up and said, "Come on then." I said, "I did not ask you to do this." He looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. "Sure you did," he said. "You just did it by sitting there." His ship was called the Reckless Theorem, which I felt was either a joke or a warning. It was not a military vessel. It was a private cargo runner, mid-sized, visibly repaired in at least 11 places I could identify from the docking bay alone. The interior was warm in a way that felt intentional. Soft lighting, a worn couch bolted near the navigation bay, and an impractical number of small green plants growing in containers along the corridor walls. "You grow plants," I said. "Keeps the air good," he said. "Also, I like them." I did not comment further. His search method was unlike anything I had been taught. He did not run a grid pattern. He did not follow probability distributions of trajectory. He pulled up old smuggler routes through the outer drift, routes he had apparently collected over years of cargo work, and cross-referenced them with the shuttle's last heading. Then he started asking different questions. Not where would the shuttle go, but where would the shuttle need to stop? A non-registered craft with an unplanned passenger, especially a child causing noise or requiring care, would need to divert, would need to deal with the situation. There were only so many places in the outer drift where a craft could dock. "Most searches follow physics," he said, pulling up a three-dimensional route map covered in his own annotations. "I follow inconvenience." I studied his map, I studied his reasoning. I found that I could not argue with it. It was not the method I would have used. It was not logical in the way I understood logic. It was logical in a different way, a human way, that centered not on where things went, but on what they needed. 3 hours into the flight, we received a signal. A way station called the Marrow, a name that told you everything you needed to know about its reputation, had logged an unregistered child aboard an incoming shuttle. The shuttle had docked there 6 hours ago. The child was, according to the log, extremely verbal and disruptive to general operations. I recognized my daughter in that description immediately. The Marrow was the kind of place that existed in the space between laws. It was rusted and poorly pressurized and populated by people who had chosen, for various reasons, to live outside the systems that everyone else relied on. I had been trained to consider such places dangerous. I still did. Marcus docked without any weapons visible. I asked him if that was intentional. "If we show up armed, we're a threat," he said. "If we show up open, we're desperate parents willing to pay. Desperate people with money are the best customers. Nobody wants to complicate that." This was not reasoning I had encountered in any diplomatic training. It was also, I had to admit, correct. The captain of the Marrow was a woman named Grev. She was not what I expected. She was tired, deeply, structurally tired, in the way of someone who had been making difficult decisions for a very long time, without anyone to share the weight. She had found Lyra aboard the shuttle when it docked, realized the child was alone, and clearly not supposed to be there, and had separated her from the general population because, and this was her exact phrasing, she would not stop explaining things to people, and it was making everyone uncomfortable. I almost smiled. It was the closest I came to it all night. I watched Marcus talk to Grev. He learned her name in the first 30 seconds, and used it afterward as though they were old acquaintances. He asked about the station's history. He listened to the answer. He made a comment about the engine configuration of the docked ships that was apparently technically impressive enough to make 2 of her crew members look up with interest. He did not perform friendliness. He simply was friendly, in the unstoppable, weather-like way that certain humans seem to generate warmth, the way stars generated light, not as a strategy, but as a natural condition of existing. Grev agreed to return Lyra in exchange for trade credits and a sealed case of something Marcus had in his cargo hold. I asked him afterward what it was. "Earth coffee," he said. I looked at him. "Real ground coffee," he said. "Not the synthesized kind. She'll trade that all year for good margins." It was the right currency. "You paid for my daughter's life with coffee," I said. "I paid for your daughter's safe return with something the other person actually wanted," he said. "That's just negotiation." Lyra was waiting in a side room when Grev's crew brought her out. She was sitting very straight, the way she sat when she was holding herself together through force of will. And the moment she saw me, she crossed the room at a speed that surprised even the humans present, and pressed her face against my shoulder, and did not say anything at all for a long time. I held her. I did not calculate anything. I just held her. The journey back to Nexus Orin took 3 days. Lyra recovered from her fear faster than I expected, which should not have surprised me. She began asking Marcus questions approximately 4 hours after we departed the Marrow. She asked about Earth, about his ship, about why humans kept plants when they had air recyclers, about whether the reckless theorem was a joke or a reference to something specific. He answered every question. He never simplified his answers, because she was a child. He never became impatient. He told her the ship's name was both a joke and a tribute, a reminder that some of the most important things in his life had happened because he ignored the odds. She considered this carefully and said it was a good naming philosophy. I watched them from across the navigation bay. I was watching something I did not have a word for in my language. I am not sure we had the concept. Whatever it was, it looked like a large human and a small Sorvathi child talking about engine theory at a table covered in plant containers, and it looked like something that should not have happened, that every probability assessment said would not happen, and yet here it was, happening, in the warm light of a battered cargo ship in deep space. I asked him that night, while Lyra slept, why he had come. He thought about it. He did not give me a fast answer, which I had noticed was his habit for questions he took seriously. I think humans feel other people's pain in their own bodies, he said. Like, physically. When I saw you on that bench, I felt it. Not as bad as you felt it, obviously, but enough. And once you feel something like that, you can't just do nothing. It's not a choice. It's more like a reflex. My people would call that a disorder, I said. Yeah, he said. Mine do too sometimes. He looked out at the stars for a moment. But it got your daughter home. I did not answer him. I looked at the stars instead, and I thought about the word reflex. The idea that caring could be involuntary, that it could live in a body the way balance or hunger lived in a body, something that simply fired when the conditions were right. I had spent my entire life believing that emotion was a thing you managed, a variable to be controlled so it did not distort your outcomes. Marcus Webb had walked into the outer drift with nothing but a battered ship and an involuntary reflex, and my daughter was asleep in the next room. When we returned to Nexus Orin, the council wanted a full debrief. They wanted methodology. They wanted the data trail, the search pattern, the system that had produced this outcome when every established system had assessed it as unrecoverable. I stood in front of them, the delegates, the station authorities, my own diplomatic corps, and they waited for my answer. I thought about grids and probability distributions. I thought about beacon signals and jurisdiction maps. I thought about all the correct, logical, properly calculated things that had looked at my daughter lost in the dark and concluded, not possible. Then I thought about a man eating a protein bar on a bench, asking me what she liked. A human decided she was worth finding, I said. He did not calculate the probability. He did not assess the resource cost. He felt that it was wrong that she was lost, and he found it unacceptable to let that wrongness continue, and then he went, and he fixed it. The council waited for more, for a system they could log and replicate. That is the complete methodology, I said. Lyra still talks about him. She has begun researching Earth with the focused intensity she applies to things she has decided matter. She wants to know why humans evolved empathy as a physical sensation rather than a cognitive function. She wants to know if all of them are like that, or just some. She wants to know if the plants in his ship have names. I told her I did not know. I told her she could ask him, because he had given us his contact signal before we docked, and said to use it whenever. Just like that. Not if you need something. Whenever. I am still learning what to do with that word. What I know now, after everything, is this. I spent 41 years believing that removing emotion from a problem made you better at solving it. I believed that the species who felt least were the ones who thought clearest. I believed that a mother sitting alone on a bench in the dark, doing nothing, with no plan, was a mother who had already lost. I was wrong about all of it. My daughter is asleep in the next room. I can hear her breathing. I did not calculate the odds of that. I did not find a method or run a model, or assess a probability. A human simply refused to let that bench be the end of the story, and it wasn't.